This morning, we will use this valuable time. The intention behind this is to impart a comprehensive and valuable lesson to everyone involved. Specifically, this discussion will focus on the Building Society Act, commonly known as BSA, which is currently being utilized and implemented by our esteemed Bodhi Society. We will delve into the specifics of how the Bodhi Society is applying this particular framework in its operations and what implications it holds for its members and activities. The very one that you wear on your clothes, which we have been consistently using ever since we were in Chicago. After arriving here yesterday, all of you immediately started using it, didn't you? I hope you found it useful, wearing a lot of clothes with it on. This is truly indeed the very beginning of our origin story. In the foreseeable future, perhaps not only within the vast expanse of China, but also across the entirety of the world, this profound and significant symbol will likely be observed in a multitude of prominent places. As one of our esteemed Dharma friends, who is deeply knowledgeable, has just thoughtfully mentioned, wherever there is the sun and the moon, we should always have the profound intention to benefit all sentient beings, right? How is it said? To widely spread the Dharma wherever there is sun and moon. Yes, that's very good. Originally, our aspiration was also like this. As long as there is the enduring light of the sun and the gentle glow of the moon, wherever their radiant light shines, wherever their warmth touches, or wherever their illumination extends, we deeply aspire to widely spread the profound Dharma and bring immense benefit to all beings in all those diverse places. No matter what kind of state or condition I currently find myself in, no matter what state my body is in, or what current state my mind is truly and completely in, regardless of my status or wealth, and no matter how many constantly evolving and unpredictable changing factors there are in this vast and intricate world, we steadfastly choose not to concern ourselves with them, as long as I continue to exist, even through countless reincarnations and life after life, wherever the radiant light of the sun and the gentle glow of the moon shines across the boundless expanse. We must aspire to diligently spread the profound Dharma and benefit all sentient beings in every corner of the world in all those diverse places. This is a fundamental and deeply cherished principle that we have learned and embraced. Therefore, the BSA framework that we currently utilize, where B stands for Bodhi, representing enlightenment and wisdom, and S stands for study signifying diligent learning and cultivation, is crucial. A is an abbreviation for wisdom, isn't that quite right? This way, it's much more convenient and adaptable in various different situations. Otherwise, if we were to call it something like a Buddhist association, it would seem that non-Buddhists might feel some resistance or have various concerns. So, as for our clothing collection, it truly carries a relatively modern and contemporary symbol, and you can comfortably wear it in virtually any setting or occasion. And our own people know that this is someone related to our group, while for others, it's basically unnoticeable. So, as for the sun and the moon, I intentionally, you see, just wrote them casually, scribbled them randomly, but in the end it still turned into a kind of artwork. At that time I also made a solemn vow that wherever the light of the sun and moon shines forth, we can truly bring immense benefit and profound happiness to all sentient beings, to every single living being on this planet, to all living beings. That's precisely what I was thinking. So, it is truly imperative that we all embrace and actively pursue this profound aspiration. Today we are presented with such an extraordinarily wonderful and truly unique opportunity, a moment that is genuinely remarkable and exceptionally great. So today here we are gathered together. Since we don't have very much time available at the moment, I might spend about half an hour, perhaps even a little more, with each and every one of you individually. Using this significant amount of time, I want to briefly talk to you all about some important matters, and what I'll be discussing may not be anything particularly new or groundbreaking, but it is relevant and applicable in various different places and contexts and across many different situations. The Dharma can be taught according to the needs of the audience, so we can approach it from many different angles to understand the teachings of Buddhism. Everyone present here today should be relatively fortunate in terms of worldly blessings and material comforts, otherwise even just coming here might have been quite difficult indeed. And in terms of spiritual blessings, we are also quite fortunate. Amid such a deeply entrenched Western ideological current, we have managed to hold on to our own faith. As some Dharma friends just mentioned, without the study, contemplation, and practice of Buddhism, life might feel very lonely and often lack much profound and significant meaning. However, because of this systematic and incredibly thorough study, we genuinely feel that life is truly abundant and incredibly rich, not only not lonely or isolated, but also vibrantly full of immense vitality and dynamic, pulsating energy, and imbued with profound and truly significant meaning and purpose. So I think all of us who are gathered here today should reflect on things from this perspective. I myself have been to Western countries many times, And every time I come, I am filled with emotion. Why is that? Because the technology here is advanced, and the overall architecture and all its intricate aspects, indeed, when thoughtfully compared to many of our own familiar places, the material standard of living here is remarkably and exceptionally high, and the standard of material wealth is especially and significantly elevated, showcasing a truly prosperous environment. But as for the spiritual side, as everyone universally knows and understands in terms of the spiritual dimension, many people are quite empty and lacking. Some individuals are even almost in a state of profound despair. Indeed, most people truly. When we observe our surroundings, we clearly see the immediate environment here, the impressive buildings, including the significant development of advanced Western technology, while in many other places, extensive construction is still actively ongoing and progressing steadily. Here, almost all the buildings, except for a very few, have already been completed. It was the same when I came here over 20 years ago. I visited Boston back then. It was just as calm and peaceful. When I first arrived here in the year 2013, it was exactly the same as it is now. Even now, as you can see today, there hasn't been much change. It's always been like this, basically unchanged for 100 years. In Boston, for example, most of the buildings were completed many years ago. Whether it's Boston, New York, or Washington, they're all like this. So there are still significant differences between developing and developed countries. There are still big gaps in certain aspects. In this regard, we feel a sense of rejoicing. Indeed, this particular kind of technological philosophy, which is quite prevalent in the Western world, has changed the fate of humanity. This is truly a wonderfully remarkable and quite extraordinary thing. But on the other hand, we can also clearly sense that inside these luxurious and opulent houses, there is a certain feeling, and among those driving luxury cars, there is still a lot of fear and a lack of security within. Some even need to take sleeping pills every day, and the number of people committing suicide is also increasing. At the same time, in places like where we are now, incidents like terrorist attacks are happening more and more frequently. You here should also be aware of this. There are more and more unsafe factors. What is the reason for this? Actually, we human beings, if we could really observe many causes and conditions, we would truly understand a lot of the underlying principles. But let's not talk about these particular things today. Overall, at the Boston Buddhist Academy, there are probably about this many people and some other individuals as well. I am truly delighted. So what I want to say today is I hope that the Buddhists present here should continuously listen, contemplate, and practice. The Academy mainly emphasizes 3 words for everyone. Listen, truly listen, deeply contemplate, and diligently practice. Just these 3 profound and essential words. If we genuinely possess and embody these 3 fundamental qualities, we are indeed truly devout individuals and consequently very highly qualified and esteemed members of the Academy. If we find ourselves truly lacking these 3 essential practices, attentive listening, profound contemplation, and diligent practicing, then even if we are considered members merely in name or hold a title without genuine engagement, in reality, there are still significant and fundamental aspects of our involvement that genuinely need to be thoroughly examined and perhaps re-evaluated. Why do I pose this question and emphasize this point so strongly? You all should know. First, we must attentively listen to the Dharma. This is extremely important and crucial. If we do not listen carefully, we simply cannot fully understand the profound teachings of Buddhism. We all know that in elementary school, middle school, and university nowadays, whether it's a higher education institution or a secondary school, in fact, all of them heavily rely on teachers to give comprehensive lectures. After the lecture, you then diligently do your homework and actively participate in discussions. This is the case in the East and also in the West. It's exactly the same in every single country. This is also profoundly true in our traditional monasteries. There must be spiritual teachers and gurus to explain these principles to you. Only after they explain the principles do you understand. If you don't have this, then there's absolutely no way. The same logic applies, and the profound nature of Buddhism is even more apparent now indeed. If such profound teachings are not explained by a spiritual teacher, there is simply no way to fully and completely understand their true meaning. Therefore, everyone here should not think that just listening to one single treatise is enough. As I just mentioned, it is absolutely crucial that everyone consciously and actively takes full responsibility for their own continuous learning and educational development. This is not merely because we have some rigid or strict rule that dictates you absolutely have to study. Rather, it stems from a deeper understanding of personal growth and the intrinsic value of acquiring knowledge and skills for one's future. It's not just because the Dharma teacher says so, or because you have to submit your study and practice report at the end of the month, that you feel you have to attend a few classes. Actually, our requirements are very, very minimal. The basic knowledge of Buddhism cannot be fully and completely acquired just by solely relying on our current course content. In actual fact, you can't actually learn that much from it, Even though we teach texts like the Bodhicariyavatara and preliminary practices, our minimum requirement is still quite basic. Of course, compared to the courses of some other teachers, this one is quite good. Our threshold is considered relatively high. But first, let me tell everyone this important point. Why is it that in today's modern society, so many people truly do not understand the profound Dharma, the fundamental teachings? To be honest, they have a little bit of faith. But this faith, if it isn't supported by listening to more teachings from qualified spiritual friends, you absolutely won't be able to truly understand. Because Buddhism is an extremely, extremely profound field of knowledge. Just like when we study physics or chemistry in the secular world, or in fields like accounting or even computer science, you definitely need a professional and experienced teacher to instruct and guide you effectively. If you do not have a professional teacher available, and you just grab a few basic books and simply open your computer, and then try to learn on your own, cases of people becoming self-taught experts like this are actually quite rare in human history. And even now, it's the same for us. If you look at everyone in the entire world who truly acquires knowledge, they all indeed rely on a good teacher, studying with them for either a long or short period of time, and then successfully completing their extensive academic studies. As for Buddhist studies, it is an even more profoundly insightful, all-encompassing subject with such incredibly rich and diverse content. This comprehensive and in-depth course not only discusses the various phenomena in our everyday lives, all sorts of different phenomena, but more importantly, it also covers things that our eyes cannot see and our hands cannot touch. Many, many truths that transcend the mundane world. A significant amount of dark matter that our human eyes are completely unable to perceive at all. Or many hidden phenomena are fully and comprehensively explained to us in great detail. At such times, if we truly don't possess sufficient knowledge and profound wisdom, we encounter challenges. Perhaps as we study, we might end up developing wrong views. Why is it that some dedicated Buddhists, as they deeply study, suddenly become completely unreachable by phone or simply can't be contacted at all, as if they have vanished? We don't know if they've been reborn in the heavenly realms, or if they've fallen into hell, or what their situation is in the human world. We have people like this in our study group as well. They don't reply to emails, and there's no response to messages either. Their phone is always completely turned off, making it unreachable. What is the reason for this? It's because as they study, the Dharma hasn't truly entered their hearts. When the Dharma hasn't entered the heart, they just see it as ordinary knowledge. So in the end, they choose to leave on their own. If they choose to leave, perhaps if it were face to face, they'd be afraid of losing face or feeling embarrassed. So they keep observing and hesitating over and over again. In the end, they often feel, oh, the best and most sensible choice is to simply turn off my phone. They completely cut themselves off from all their social circles. To them, this seems like the only truly wise and best possible choice. In the end, they end up just like others, no different from before they started studying. They just blend back into the world. What is the reason for this? It's because when they heard the Dharma, it didn't truly touch their hearts. Precisely because they didn't develop a genuine Buddhist conviction. In the end, they chose to become someone who doesn't really fit in anywhere. There really are such people among us Buddhists. I'm not criticizing them. But indeed, they are also, sometimes I feel, rather pitiable. They haven't even completed a single treatise. As Buddhists, human life is so hard to obtain, and the Dharma is so difficult to encounter. Moreover, it's especially not easy for us to come across such a wonderful teaching. Yet they don't cherish the opportunity, and if they just casually abandon and simply let it go, then for us it becomes a concern. And especially for that individual, it is truly a great regret, a very unfortunate thing. But this kind of fate, none of us can truly change it. What is the main and underlying reason for this? It's that we haven't genuinely listened and learned properly from our experiences. As for myself, I am especially, indeed extraordinarily joyful. Why am I so joyful? It's not because before, when I was with my teacher, basically, it was around that particular time, in the 1970s and 80s, I personally visited many different countries. At that time, it should have been considered a great honor, but I never really felt that this was something that made me especially fortunate. What truly made me feel fortunate was that when I was young in front of my teacher, I genuinely received many, many excellent teachings. And each of these profound and ancient teachings brought me great joy in my own practice. And I treated them with great seriousness. It wasn't just that I listened a little bit today and studied a little bit tomorrow then tossed it aside and gave up on it. It wasn't like that at all. Back then, during that particular era, our generation, you could genuinely say that we wholeheartedly devoted all of our energy and efforts, all our time, absolutely everything, entirely and completely devoted to studying the Dharma. Even fundamental things like eating, sleeping, and even truly resting are essential. These were basically things we didn't pay much attention to. To be honest, the way we diligently studied at that time was such that our living conditions were also quite simple, indeed extremely simple. You could genuinely say that back then, we truly lived a remarkably low-carbon lifestyle, a truly sustainable way of life, content with little, with very few desires, and extremely frugal. Even if we hadn't wanted to be frugal, we had no choice. We were genuinely very poor. Actually, growing up in such an environment, from my personal perspective, looking back now, it was very meaningful. Because the certainty and conviction that developed in my mind were extremely solid, you could say unshakable, meaning incredibly stable and unwavering, very firm and resolute in its foundation. First of all, for all of us who have diligently studied together, all the esteemed Dharma friends who have gathered here from various different countries and diverse places across the globe, you must possess a particularly firm, deeply self-aware kind of unwavering faith, a truly self-generated and profound confidence. This specific kind of confidence is not because the Dharma teacher encourages you every day or keeps urging you, nor because your Dharma friends keep telling you, don't give up, study well. That's not necessary. Once you truly encounter the profound and sacred Dharma, it's like a helpless fish that has been floundering desperately on the hot, scorching sand, suffering intensely under the relentless burning sun. And then, after a long and arduous journey, it finally discovers a source of wonderfully cool, incredibly refreshing water. Within this crystal clear, pristine water, it can effortlessly swim and gracefully drift about, moving with complete freedom wherever its heart desires. For this fish, this newfound environment brings an indescribable and profound sense of pure joy and absolute contentment. In precisely the same way, we have been ceaselessly struggling in the endless cycle of samsara all along, constantly and relentlessly tossed about in this vast and intricate world of dust and desires. But later, when we truly and profoundly encounter the Dharma, which is like a wish-fulfilling jewel, we gain a profound sense of coolness and a sweet nectar from deep within our very hearts, and experience a kind of happiness that is truly beyond all imagination. At that time, we naturally, without needing others to constantly persuade or comfort us, without being urged by others all the time. It's not like that. It should happen naturally, spontaneously, and effortlessly. In the end, you will fully and completely devote your entire body and mind to the profound and sacred Dharma. When you deeply immerse yourself in the teachings of the Dharma, especially in the crucial first few formative years, you must lay a very solid and enduring foundation. If your foundation is not stable, then your later contemplation and practice of the Dharma may ultimately end up being just empty talk on paper, or like building on very thin ice, which carries both risks and dangers. Therefore, I firmly believe that when we embark on the journey of learning, the very initial and fundamental step of hearing or listening attentively is profoundly and exceptionally important. If you do not diligently listen to and thoroughly study the sacred Dharma properly and with full concentration, and just accept it based on your own personal beliefs, then such a belief can be truly called a superstition. So, what exactly is superstition? Actually, you have no real profound understanding of the underlying principles you are learning, and therefore you simply accept them without critical thought. It's just simply a blind and purely impulsive belief, nothing less. And if you accept something in this way, that is called superstition. From a purely scientific perspective, we are especially and strongly opposed to any form of superstition. However, from the perspective of Buddhism itself, it also very strongly opposes superstition and its harmful effects. In the Buddhist scriptures, the Buddha also spoke about followers of faith and followers of the Dharma. Followers of faith are those who proceed based on their own faith. However, such people may not last more than a few years. Gradually over time, their faith completely fades away. Within just a few years, their faith is entirely lost. There is another type called followers of the Dharma. Relying on their own wisdom or the guidance of a good teacher, they truly understand the very profound and deep meaning of the Buddha's teachings. At that point, their firm conviction, generally speaking, will not easily and quickly fade away or diminish, and will not fade away. Take our Tibetan region, for example. During the time of the Cultural Revolution, many great monks and masters were imprisoned, and the suffering they endured was, from the perspective of ordinary human pain, almost unimaginable and indescribable. Yet even in such circumstances, not only did they not lose their faith, but in fact, in such a challenging environment, they even recorded all their realizations and spiritual attainments in writing and so on. They documented their spiritual experiences and realizations in writing. Such cases and stories are countless. Therefore, as we embark on this journey now, it is absolutely essential that we first truly cultivate and possess the sincere intention, diligent preparation, and a well thought out plan to genuinely study Buddhism for ourselves. This is very important. Recently, I noticed that many professors at the University of Chicago, they personally own an extraordinary number of books. This extensive collection includes their in-depth research on Tibetan Buddhism. Each person has several hundred, even several thousand books. By comparison, we Buddhists only have 2 or 3 books. And if we just carry around these 2 or 3 books every day, of course, in one sense, that's very good, because we still have our own devoted faith. For example, some Christian believers, they also carry the Bible with them all day long. And in other religions, some people carry the Quran, some carry another book until it becomes worn out. There are such cases as well. But in reality, we may need to be more broadly learned and knowledgeable. As Buddhists, if you want to benefit sentient beings, just now, some Dharma friends made vows saying, from now on, I want to, regardless of whether I am ordained or a layperson, I must benefit sentient beings. If I want to benefit sentient beings, we need to understand both worldly and transcendental principles. We also need to understand many principles from both ancient and modern times. If we don't understand these, the capacities of the sentient beings we are trying to help can be said to be extremely diverse. If we want to teach them according to their individual needs, it will be very difficult to adapt accordingly, especially now in places like the West, countries that are rooted in critical thinking. Some aspects of Western education are particularly problematic. It was only after I arrived in the West that I often prayed to my teachers and the 3 jewels, fearing that I might develop wrong views about the 3 jewels, because from a young age, the concepts instilled in children there, the ideas they are taught every day, are all about deconstruction. The true Western critical philosophy actually hasn't been around for many years. It only has a relatively short history of a few decades, but they, however, in fact, this genuine critical philosophy, its principle is that under mature wisdom and reasonable circumstances, you have the right to refute. But what is it like now? What do many schools promote and encourage? As long as you can refute something, it's considered acceptable, whether you have a valid point or not. Because they all strongly emphasize creativity and truly focus on developing imagination, fostering a deeper understanding. If that's the case, there is one benefit. Of course, it's certainly not an especially closed-minded way of thinking in any sense of the word. It allows for a lot of imagination, and that's a good thing. But the absolute worst part is, from a very young age, they have absolutely no confidence in anyone at all and possess no genuine sense of respect. They always look at others with the clear intention to tear them down, to harshly criticize them. So when individuals like this grow up and mature, they actually aren't happy either. I've seen this recently, and I've also come into contact with many professors in academia. These esteemed professors appear to be quite knowledgeable and experienced, because maybe they're not like teachers in our country. Their salaries are also relatively high, and each of them has their own distinct place to live, a dwelling, and in all aspects, their living conditions are quite good. When individuals possess substantial financial resources and are blessed with relatively attractive physical appearances, in addition to achieving a certain elevated level of social status, a sense of arrogance naturally tends to emerge and manifest itself. However, this is often because they were raised and developed within a particular environment, where critical thinking and criticism were emphasized from a young age. Even after growing up, they are still not happy. Whether it's with their family, whether it's at work or with colleagues, they are extremely self-centered. And if you talk about being self-centered, everyone is very much focused on their own self-protection and on constantly affirming themselves and their worth. As a direct result of this, they inevitably become more and more tense and anxious over time. On the surface, I think the West is a very free, equal, and a truly wonderful place with lots and lots of truly great slogans. But in reality, if you actually enter their lives and observe them closely, it's actually not that free at all. There are many restrictions that might even be more than ours. And in the East, there are some rules we might not really understand. But everyone here is very happy and incredibly relaxed. I always feel that when I'm among Chinese or Tibetan communities, it's a very relaxed and truly joyful atmosphere. But when I join some Western groups, it's often quite different. I notice that everyone's expressions are very tense and serious. This is my privacy. That can't be talked about. In this current climate, everyone is especially uptight and on edge. So all this so-called freedom and equality in the end might just become something that exists merely on paper, and some principles written in declarations. To be honest, sometimes the significant differences in our diverse cultures can bring people either great happiness or profound suffering. It's truly hard to definitively say. When it comes to understanding these fundamental kinds of principles, as devoted Mahayana Buddhists, we may also need to diligently learn about them and their implications, and also to fully understand and truly grasp them. So, what exactly am I actually talking about here? In listening to the Dharma, we need to listen broadly. Why do we need to listen and contemplate? First is to hear about things in Buddhism, things related to practice and liberation. At the same time, if you have the opportunity and the ability as a Mahayana Buddhist, you should also understand some of the differences in thought between Eastern and Western cultures. If you want to benefit sentient beings, you may need to know how people in the East think, how people in the West think, what their ways of thinking are, and what their values are, and what their philosophies of life are. If we don't understand these things, we might make many mistakes that we shouldn't make. So this is about the aspect of listening and learning. Next is the aspect of contemplation. After hearing and learning the Dharma, one should repeatedly reflect, debate, and also study it in depth. This point is especially emphasized in Tibetan Buddhism. I just mentioned this earlier at the Kagyu Center. Now, some people in our academic circles, among the three, listening, contemplation, and practice, only focus on the middle one, without having listened to the Dharma beforehand and without practicing afterwards, just focusing on this contemplation in the middle. They have a lot of books and spend all day with them. I saw someone who started by researching biographies, and when studying biographies, he read many biographies on this topic and then reflected on them himself. But actually, thinking on your own can sometimes be quite troublesome, because you haven't heard its systematic teachings and lineage beforehand, and you also haven't practiced it afterwards. When it comes to some principles of practice, they still feel quite troubled. So we Buddhists are different. We have already listened to the framework of Buddhist teachings beforehand. After listening, we contemplate them over and over again. Our root guru mentioned in The Heart Essence of Loyal Advice, he also talked about this particular topic. How exactly did he phrase it, do you recall? He said that merely just listening to the words cannot truly dispel our lingering doubts, nor can it genuinely generate authentic faith in the profound Dharma or the enlightened Buddha. Therefore, we actively engage in thoughtful debate and thorough discussion, and diligently use various effective methods to give rise to genuine and profound wisdom. This is very necessary. As Buddhists, on one hand, we often burn incense, make offerings to the Buddha, and release animals. These are all very good and commendable points. However, after all is said and done, these are only a part of the broader Buddhist practices and teachings. It is essential for us Buddhists to calm down, and regarding a certain issue, for example, the law of cause and effect, or the cultivation of bodhicitta, or the emptiness as taught in the middle way, we must thoroughly discuss these important topics with each other. This is very important. If you do not do this, and only perform a few good deeds each day, on one hand, that's certainly good. As lay practitioners, it is indeed especially difficult for you. But as devoted Buddhists, it is truly a challenging path to navigate. We need to go a significant step further in our comprehensive approach. That is, apart from our immediate and direct actions and what we personally do, burning incense and making offerings to the Buddha are actually just part of the process of making offerings, and releasing animals is merely an act of benefiting others. But if we truly want to spread the Dharma or engage in practice, we must contemplate the meaning of the teachings. This is very important. Therefore, the second point is to reflect on the doctrines of Buddhism. This is the second point I want to make. Thirdly, everyone present here still needs to practice consistently. If you do not practice, the afflictions in your mind stream, such as greed and anger, will be very difficult to completely eliminate, because, for us, these deeply ingrained issues have been firmly rooted since beginningless time, and are not easy to remove. If we only listen to the Dharma, but do not practice it well, then your anger and afflictions will not be easy to truly eliminate. You must diligently practice. Why is it that some of us now have such very severe and indeed persistent anger issues? We often lose our temper with our Dharma friends and with our family members. It seems that when we are practicing, everything goes well. Just like Maitreya Bodhisattva, we seem very compassionate, extremely so, especially when meditating, appearing very peaceful. But when something happens, we start to truly feel intense anger. And when anger profoundly arises, it is also very painful indeed. Some of you might even impulsively throw things when you get really, truly angry, perhaps not fully knowing what it truly looks like when Westerners get angry. Perhaps when you get angry, you also carry a kind of Western way of thinking. Maybe you have been somewhat westernized. But no matter what, at that moment, we ourselves may also be suffering a lot, and others are suffering too. But why is it that even though we are clearly learning, some of us have been studying for many years already, why do we still lose our temper when we shouldn't? How embarrassing, how shameful. Some people say this. Actually, there's nothing to be ashamed of. The truth is, it's because we haven't truly practiced. Maybe it's just difficult to apply it in our daily lives. So we start from the 5 preliminary practices, and now we all emphasize completing 500,000 preliminary practices. But does that mean once you've finished, you have no more afflictions? Not necessarily. Even after completing 500,000, there are still many people who lose their temper. So this also doesn't mean that after you finish practicing, everything is resolved. Not at all. But there is indeed a huge difference between practicing and not practicing. Therefore, only after practicing can we truly and profoundly benefit all sentient beings. So, everyone here, especially those of us who are from overseas Dharma centers, I extend my warmest greetings. This time, we are also here because of a certain karmic connection. Whenever there is a Dharma center established in a city, I also try my very best to actively participate. Of course, when it comes to within China, it's just not possible, because there are simply too many people located there. So, if I were to visit every single Dharma center in every major city, that would be completely unrealistic. However, in this particular instance, it is also profoundly important to fulfill the aspirations and desires of everyone involved. Therefore, on this occasion, we are collectively embarking on a comprehensive yet accessible teaching session for all. This session will focus on the profound significance of 3 fundamental concepts: attentive hearing, deep contemplation, and diligent practice. I've spoken about them in other settings before, but today, taking into careful consideration the current circumstances and prevailing conditions within the United States, I'm just going to talk about these 3 words: hearing, contemplation, and practice. And next, I will be in Boston, where this particular endeavor hasn't been done before, ever. Or maybe I just forgot. Give everyone the transmission of the 37 practices of a bodhisattva, as well as the Guru Yoga of His Holiness the Dharma King. His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche once stayed at the Shambhala Center in Boston and spent a few days there. At that time, it seemed we came from New York, then to Boston, and then from Boston we went to Canada. And then from Canada we eventually came back to Boston, Massachusetts, eventually. And from the historic city of Boston, we flew to France. That was how it was back then. So His Holiness has also been to this place before. As for me personally, after arriving here, I have a truly different and profound kind of feeling. This is indeed a place blessed by a revered Vajra master, which is extremely auspicious and profoundly beneficial. Therefore, today, for all the sentient beings of Boston, I sincerely hope that a genuine and profound bodhicitta will arise deeply within our minds. To facilitate this, I will now recite a sacred Guru Yoga practice and the lineage of the 37 practices of a bodhisattva. This can be considered for all our Dharma friends today. This is truly a wonderful gathering for everyone present here. I am also especially grateful to all our esteemed Dharma friends who have joined us here for providing a Dharma center for everyone. Actually, in America, this is not easy at all. Having such a Dharma center is truly not easy. I hope that in the future, when all the necessary conditions come together, Dharma friends will not only engage in life release, but also carry out other especially meaningful virtuous activities. More importantly, everyone should actively practice and diligently study together as a cohesive group. Studying is far more important than any of our social gatherings, and it truly matters, such as sock offerings or holding spiritual salons together, including the practice of life release or offering lamps, which are all very important and significant practices within Buddhism. But when compared to diligently studying, attentively listening, deeply contemplating, and actively practicing together, nothing else can truly and genuinely compare. So, for example, within a mere month or even just half a month, when everyone gathers together, if you happen to meet often, you must absolutely make sure to diligently study and learn. The merit of studying, listening, contemplating, and practicing cannot be matched by any other activity, because many other activities can also be done by others. For example, when it comes to offering lamps, as long as you have sufficient money, anybody can simply and readily buy a few lamps and do it. But as for studying, it truly depends on the conditions of having a qualified teacher, and then we can learn. This is something extremely, extremely rare to come by, even in hundreds of millions of eons. So for us in the United States, now in major metropolitan areas like Chicago, Boston, and New York, and also extending to the West Coast, there are several prominent cities that currently have in-person group practice sessions available. Most of us attend classes online. And of course, attending classes online is also very good. But sometimes when everyone gathers together in a communal setting, for example, to carefully read certain insightful biographies or profound teachings, and everyone reads aloud together, sharing the experience collectively, this kind of group study is even more meaningful. So in this regard, I sincerely hope that all of you Dharma friends in Boston being here today is also very good and truly a blessing. This is indeed a kind of profound karmic connection. Today is also a particularly auspicious beginning. We can all make such grand aspirations as this, that wherever the radiant light of the sun and the moon brightly shines upon the earth, our bodhicitta, our altruistic mind, should also shine there. Although we are in such an environment, we often encounter many unfavorable and challenging obstacles. This is quite normal. When I was at the Institute, I distinctly remember sometimes my health wasn't good, sometimes my mood wasn't good, and sometimes it was various factors in the surrounding environment that brought different kinds of troubles. Sometimes the behavior of the Dharma friends listening to the teachings below would make me feel annoyed. There were all sorts of things like this, but I have always worked hard to make it to today. I feel that it hasn't been easy for me either. The other day, some people asked me, "What are your thoughts now?" I said, "As for teaching the Dharma to the Han Chinese here, I have already..." It was the precious Guru who asked me to teach the Dharma, and I have continued on this path up to today. I have persisted for 30 years. In an environment like ours, relying on a body like mine, I personally feel that it probably hasn't been an easy thing to do. So I think for those of you who are currently living abroad, sometimes it's because of family reasons, sometimes, especially now, both domestically and internationally. The overall economic trends are not very good, and the political instability is not very optimistic either. The overall safety and well-being of society as a whole is also not particularly well guaranteed or adequately protected. You could certainly say that in our daily lives themselves, and in the broader context of our existence, life is a painful experience. So there are many, many uncertain factors for us, and many worries about insecurity. But no matter what, as long as our body and mind exist, we should give rise to a truly altruistic intention. So when we make such very grand aspirations, as long as the radiant light of the sun and the moon continues to shine brightly upon this world, we will diligently strive to benefit all sentient beings in a multitude of various ways. And we make such aspirations. Okay.